On a stormy night, with heavy rain beating against the windows and thunder rumbling in the distance, Dr. Min found himself at the old, creaky hospital, preparing for his very first night shift. He was new here, freshly graduated and excited to take on the challenges of the medical world. The hospital, however, had a long history. A history full of whispers, strange occurrences, and unsettling rumors. But Min, being a practical man, didn't believe in such things. He chalked it up to overactive imaginations and stories passed down from staff to staff. As the night grew darker, Min walked through the dimly lit hallways. The lights flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows on the walls. He passed room after room, checking on the patients, doing his usual rounds. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the quiet, sterile halls. Everything was quiet, too quiet. But Min dismissed it. After all, hospitals at night are always silent. When he came to room 7, he noticed something strange. The door was slightly ajar. He stopped, unsure of what he was seeing. He had just checked this room not long ago, and the patient had been there, a man in his 50s battling a chronic illness. But now the bed was empty. The sheets were neatly tucked in, as if no one had ever been lying there. There were no signs of disturbance. Min felt a chill run down his spine. He pushed the door open, hesitantly stepping inside. His eyes scanned the room empty. The machines were still running, the heart monitor giving off its constant, rhythmic beep. But where was the patient? Min checked the nearby chair. No sign of him. There was no one in the room at all. He reached for the patient's chart, only to find it on the nightstand, untouched. His heart began to race. He could feel something wasn't right. Just as he was about to turn and leave, he heard it. The faintest sound of breathing, a soft, shallow inhale from somewhere in the room. It didn't make sense. The bed was empty. He turned around, his eyes darting around the room. But Min stepped back, his hands trembling as he gripped the doorframe. The sound of breathing. For a moment, a feeling of dread settled over him. Later that night, this time the bed was in the same position as before, but there was something different now. The room felt colder. The air seemed thick, like it was heavier. Min stepped forward slowly, unsure of what to do. His eyes darted around, scanning every sud. Dr. Min gasped, stepping back. The man in. The patient opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Then, Min blinked, and when his hands were trembling as he left the room and hurried down the hall. The rest of his shift passed in a blur. Min did his best to focus on his work, but every time he passed room 7, his heart would race. He felt eyes on him, even though no one was there. The feeling of dread never left him, and the sound of breathing, faint and distant, seemed to follow him everywhere. When his shift ended, Min left the hospital, his mind reeling. He told himself it was all just his imagination, the stress, the fatigue getting to him. But deep down, he knew something was wrong with that hospital. Something unnatural. The next night, Min returned for another shift. As he walked down the hall, he tried to push the fear from his mind, but when he reached room 7, the door, he pushed the door open, and there, lying in the bed, was the patient. But he was not breathing. His body was cold, lifeless, and his eyes. Dr. Min ran out of the room, his heart pounding, his breath coming in short gasps. He never returned to room 7 again. And from that night on, to this day, they say if you walk down that hallway late at night, you can still hear the soft breathing from room 7. Some say it's the patient, still waiting for someone to help him. Others say it's something else entirely, something far darker, far more. It was late at night. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, each second dragging on as Dr. Kwong walked down the dimly lit hallway. His footsteps echoed eerily through the silence of the hospital, but the place felt oddly alive. He had worked here for years, yet tonight something felt different. Something was wrong. Dr. Kwong had always dismissed the rumors about this hospital, the ones about ghostly apparitions and cursed rooms. He was a man of science, a doctor who dealt in facts, not fantasy. But tonight, Even his logical mind couldn't escape the strange, oppressive feeling that had settled over him as he made his rounds. He stopped at room 6, a small room near the end of the hall. The patient in there, Mr. Hong, had been admitted weeks ago with a terminal illness. Dr. Kwong had seen his condition deteriorate day by day. The man was barely holding on to life, and Dr. Kwong had done everything he could to ease his suffering. But tonight, when he opened the door to check on Mr. Hong, something was wrong. The room was too quiet. The heart monitor was beeping steadily, but it was almost as if the air itself was holding its breath. Dr. Kwong stepped inside. The room was dim, the only light coming from the flickering overhead bulb. The curtains were drawn, but the shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, as if something were moving behind them. He glanced at the bed. Mr. Hong was still lying there, his frail form covered by a thin sheet. But as Dr. Kwong stepped closer, he noticed that something was different. The patient's eyes were open, staring blankly ahead. "Mr. Hong," Dr. Kwong called softly, but the man did not respond. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his chest rose and fell slowly with each labored breath. Dr. Kwong checked his vitals again, his fingers brushing the cold, clammy skin of Mr. Huang's wrist. His pulse was faint but still there. But when Dr. Kwong looked at the man's face again, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The patient's lips were curled in an unnatural, twisted smile. It wasn't the kind of smile one would expect from someone in a coma-like state. It was a grin, a dark, disturbing grin, as if Mr. Hong was mocking him. Dr. Kwong stepped back, a chill running down his spine. He checked the patient's chart again, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in his gut. But when he glanced up at the man once more, Mr. Huang's smile had faded. Instead, his eyes were wide open, unblinking, and locked onto Dr. Kwong's. "You can't save me," the patient whispered, his voice raspy, almost too soft to hear. But it wasn't Mr. Huang's voice. No, this voice came from somewhere deep within the man, a voice that sounded like it was from beyond the grave. Dr. Kwong stepped back, his mind racing. He looked at the monitor again, trying to focus on the numbers, the readings, anything to ground himself. But then the lights flickered. Just for a moment, the room plunged into darkness. When the lights returned, Dr. Kwong's heart stopped. Mr. Hong was gone. The bed was empty, and the sheets were neatly folded. It was as if the man had never been there at all. Panic surged through Dr. Kwong's chest as he stumbled backward. He rushed to the door, his breath coming faster, his hands shaking as he tried to open it. But the door wouldn't budge. The lock wouldn't turn. "No, no, no," Dr. Kwong muttered to himself, his voice trembling as he banged his fists against the door. But it didn't open. The hospital seemed to have sealed him inside. He turned back to the room. His mind was racing. His heart was pounding. Where had Mr. Hong gone? And then he heard it, the soft sound of breathing. It was coming from behind him. He spun around, but the room was empty, just as it had been moments before. The silence returned, thick and suffocating, as if the hospital itself was holding its breath. But then the whisper returned. This time it was louder, closer. "You can't escape, doctor," it hissed, the voice low and guttural, crawling under Dr. Kwong's skin. Suddenly, the walls of the room seemed to close in on him. The temperature dropped, his breath fogging in the air. He could hear footsteps, slow, deliberate steps echoing in the distance, moving closer. But there was no one in the hallway, no one in the building, just the eerie sound of footsteps getting louder, closer. Dr. Kwong's heart raced as he stumbled backward, his eyes darting frantically around the room. And then, through the shadows, he saw it. A figure standing at the foot of the bed. It was tall, almost too tall, with an unnatural posture. Its body was bent at strange angles, its limbs impossibly long and thin. The figure stepped closer, its face hidden in the shadows. But Dr. Kwong could feel its eyes on him, cold, unblinking, piercing into his very soul. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The figure moved, its footsteps barely making a sound on the floor. And then It spoke again, its voice low and menacing. "You were the one who couldn't save him. Now you will join him." In a panic, Dr. Kwong reached for his phone, his hands trembling as he tried to dial for help. But the screen flickered, glitching in and out of focus. The room around him seemed to warp, the walls stretching and bending in unnatural ways. It was as though the hospital itself was alive, moving with its own dark energy. Suddenly, the figure lunged at him. His hands shot out, grabbing him by the throat with terrifying strength. Dr. Kwong gasped for air, struggling to break free, but it was as if the figure's grip was made of iron. Its cold fingers dug into his skin, squeezing the life out of him. "Help me?" Dr. Kwong gasped, the words barely escaping his lips. The figure's smile stretched wider, and it leaned in close, its breath cold and rancid against Dr. Kwong's ear. "You helped him die, and now you will join him. You will never leave. None of you will ever leave." With one final, desperate effort, Dr. Kwong managed to break free from the figure's grasp. He turned to run, but the door slammed shut in front of him with a deafening crash. The room was spinning. The walls seemed to close in tighter. He was trapped. "No!" he screamed, banging against the door, but the hospital had sealed him inside. The creature, whatever it was, had won. He was never going to leave this place. As Dr. Kwong's screams echoed through the hallway, the creature watched from the shadows, waiting for the next soul to wander into its grasp. The hospital was hungry. The whispers continued. The footsteps never stopped. And the spirits of the lost patients roamed the halls forever, waiting for the next unfortunate soul to enter room 6. In the heart of the old hospital, there was a room that no one dared to enter. Room 103. It wasn't mentioned in the official records, and no one knew why it even existed in the first place. The nurses and doctors would always steer clear of that hallway. They whispered about it in hushed tones, their eyes glancing nervously at the door whenever they passed by. But no one ever spoke of what lay beyond it, no one who had survived. Anyway, tonight, like every other night, the hospital stood silent, its long, dark corridors stretching endlessly in all directions. The storm outside raged fiercely, the wind howling and the rain slapping against the windows. Inside, it was just another late-night shift, quiet except for the hum of the overhead lights. But for Lin, the young nurse working her first night shift in this hospital, the stillness was oppressive. She had heard the rumors about room 103, of course. They said it was cursed, haunted by the ghost of a patient who had died there under mysterious circumstances. No one ever talked about the patient, but there were those who claimed to have seen strange things when they had to work near that room. Yet Lin wasn't afraid. She thought it was just superstition. But tonight, that would change. As she made her rounds, checking on patients, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The hospital, usually so quiet at night, seemed even more eerily still. She passed by the hallway leading to room 103 and, as if guided by some unseen force, her feet took her toward the door. The air grew colder as she approached. The hallway lights flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. Lin could hear the distant sounds of the storm outside, but they only seemed to add to the sense of dread that was now creeping up her spine. The door to room 103 was slightly ajar, as though inviting her in. Lin hesitated, her hand trembling on the doorknob. She knew she should leave, walk away, and forget about it, but her curiosity got the best of her. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open. The room was dark, the only light coming from the flickering overhead bulb. It smelled musty, like old wood and dampness, and Lin felt an overwhelming sense of suffocation in the air. The room was empty, but it wasn't just empty in the way a normal room is when it's unoccupied. Felt wrong. The walls seemed to close in around her. The space was too small, too suffocating. Lin's eyes darted around the room, trying to make sense of what was happening. The bed, the chair, everything was in place, untouched. But as she stepped further inside, she heard something. A faint scraping sound, like nails on the floor, coming from behind the bed. Lin's heart skipped a beat. Her instincts screamed for her to turn and run, but instead, she found herself walking toward the source of the noise. The sound grew louder with each step she took, almost as if it were getting closer. When she reached the bed, the scraping stopped abruptly. Her breath caught in her throat. There, lying beneath the bed, was something that shouldn't be there. Something small, huddled in the darkness. A human shape, but it wasn't quite right. The figure was trembling, twitching, its back arched unnaturally as if it was in pain. Lynn took a step back, her mind racing, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. But before she could turn to flee, the figure's head jerked up, its eyes wide and bloodshot, glowing with an unnatural, inhuman light. It let out a screeching, guttural cry that sent a shock of terror through Lynn's entire body. She stumbled backward, falling to the floor. The figure crawled toward her, its hands dragging along the floor, fingers clawing at the air like a predatory animal. Lynn scrambled to her feet and bolted for the door. But as she reached for the doorknob, it slammed shut on its own, trapping her inside. The air grew colder. The lights flickered more violently now, casting long shadows across the room. Lynn turned around to see the figure getting closer, its mouth opening wider, revealing sharp, jagged teeth. Its skin was pale, stretched tight over its bones, and its body contorted in impossible ways as it crawled toward her. "Help me," a voice whispered from the creature's twisted mouth, but the words sounded wrong, distorted, as if they had been spoken from the depths of a nightmare. Lynn's heart raced as panic gripped her. She was trapped, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Who was this thing? Was it a patient? But no, there was no record of any patient like this. There was only one thing she could think of. This was the curse of Room 103. And now it was after her. The lights flickered again, and for a split second, everything went dark. When the lights returned, Lynn saw that the figure was gone. The room was still. It was as if it had never been there at all. But Lynn knew it hadn't been a hallucination. She could feel the darkness lingering in the room, the oppressive air that seemed to weigh down on her. As she stood there, trying to steady her breathing, she realized that she wasn't alone. Behind her, there was movement, soft, slow, like something was standing just out of view. She turned around, but no one was there. The only thing she could see was the reflection of herself in the dark window. But the reflection wasn't right. Her own face looked distorted, twisted, like something was wrong. Lynn reached for her radio to call for help, but as her hand touched it, the voice crackled to life. "Get out," it said, in a voice that wasn't her own. "Get out now before it's too late." Her heart pounded in her chest. The radio fell from her hands, crashing to the floor. Panic surged through her body as she turned to run. She tried the door again, but it wouldn't open. It was as if the room itself was holding her captive, keeping her inside, trapping her with whatever dark force resided there. The walls began to close in, the space growing smaller, suffocating her. The temperature dropped, her breath fogging in the air. And then, from the darkness, she heard it. The voice again, only this time, it was louder, clearer, and it wasn't coming from the walls. "Help me, nurse." Lynn whipped around, her eyes wide with terror. The creature was standing in the doorway, its twisted figure blocking her only escape. Its eyes were burning with that unnatural light, and its mouth was stretched wide in a grotesque grin. It spoke again, its voice a hiss, echoing in the room like 1,000 whispers. "You're mine now." Lynn screamed and charged at the door, but the creature grabbed her arm, its fingers cold and sharp as ice, digging into her skin. She struggled, trying to break free, but the more she fought, the tighter its grip became. She could feel its cold breath on her neck, the weight of its presence overwhelming her. In one final, desperate act, Lynn twisted her body, breaking free from its grasp. She stumbled backward, her hands desperately pushing against the door, but it wouldn't budge. The creature's laugh filled the room, a chilling, high-pitched sound that echoed in her ears, mocking her. And then, in the dark corner of the room, Lynn saw something that made her blood run cold. A figure standing in the shadows, its eyes glowing with that same unnatural light. Another patient, perhaps? Or was this something far worse? Lynn's breathing grew shallow as the realization hit her. She wasn't alone. Not now. Not ever again. The door slammed open, and Lynn fled into the hallway. But the laughter followed her. The creature was still behind her, and room 103 would never let her go. The doors to the hospital slammed shut, trapping her inside, and the dark whispers of room 103 filled her ears as she ran, knowing she would never escape. Some say if you listen closely at night, you can hear the sounds of the patients from room 103, still wandering the halls, forever waiting, forever trapped, just like Lynn. Rain lashed against the windows, and the sound of thunder echoed through the night, as Lynn, a young and eager nurse, walked through the hospital's dark, narrow hallways. It was her first week working the night shift at this old hospital, a place where rumors about hauntings and mysterious events were more common than they should have been. But Lynn didn't believe in ghosts or supernatural phenomena. She was determined to focus on her work and ignore the unsettling stories. As the clock struck midnight, Lynn was making her rounds, checking in on her assigned patients. The hospital was eerily quiet, the only sound being the soft beeping of machines and the faint hum of the lights. The older part of the hospital was always quiet at night, but tonight felt different, heavier, as if the silence itself was pressing down on her chest. She approached room 5, a small, dimly lit room where a middle-aged man named Mr. Tan had been staying for weeks. He had been fighting a losing battle with a chronic illness, and Lynn had been his primary nurse. When she entered the room, the first thing she noticed was that the bed was empty. The sheets were neatly folded, and the pillow was perfectly placed, as though Mr. Tan had never been there. Lynn froze. She was sure he had been in this room when she last checked on him a few hours ago. But now, nothing. No sign of him at all. She quickly checked the nearby chair. Empty. She checked the patient's records, but there was no update about a transfer. Confused, she opened the door and glanced into the hallway. No one. It was as if Mr. Tan had vanished into thin air. A chill ran through Lynn's spine. She felt a strange tightening in her chest, but she forced herself to shake it off. Maybe someone had moved him to another room without updating the records. But when she checked the nurse's station, there was no record of any such transfer. The hospital staff had no idea where Mr. Tan had gone. Her heart began to race. She returned to room 5, her eyes darting around the empty space. The machines were still running, but there was a strange stillness in the air, an oppressive, suffocating silence. As she turned to leave, a soft noise caught her attention. A faint cough, almost inaudible. It came from the corner of the room, near the window. Lynn whipped her head toward the sound, but there was nothing there. No one. Her mind raced. Had she imagined it? Was it just her nerves playing tricks on her? But then the cough came again, louder this time, followed by a faint, raspy whisper. "Help me!" Lynn's heart stopped. The voice was so faint, so ghostly, but it was undeniably there. She stepped forward cautiously, trying to locate its source. The room felt colder, and the air seemed to grow thicker. She walked toward the window, her eyes scanning the dark, empty corners of the room. The sound stopped suddenly, replaced by an unsettling quiet. She was about to turn back when she heard it. A door creaking opened down the hallway, then soft footsteps, followed by a faint giggle. Lynn's breath hitched. The hallway was empty, but the sound was unmistakable. Someone or something was moving through the hospital, playing games with her. She rushed out of room 5, her mind racing with questions. Where had Mr. Tan gone? Who had been making those noises? As she walked down the long corridor, she glanced nervously into the other rooms, her eyes scanning each one as if expecting something or someone unexpected. It wasn't until she reached the nurse's station again that she saw something that made her blood run cold. On the clipboard, in the space where Mr. Tan's name should have been, there was nothing but a series of strange, garbled symbols. Symbols that didn't belong. Lynn leaned in closer, her heart pounding. The symbols seemed to shimmer, as if they were moving on their own, rearranging themselves into a message. "I am waiting." A sense of dread washed over Lynn. She couldn't explain it, but something was terribly wrong. She turned and rushed back to room 5, her footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. When she arrived, the room was exactly the same as it had been before, empty and silent. But now there was something new. The bed was no longer neat. The sheets were twisted and turned, as if someone had been lying there, struggling to get up. Her eyes darted to the window. The faint light from the streetlights outside cast long shadows across the room. And that's when she saw it. Just beyond the window, in the reflection of the glass, was the figure of a man standing in the hallway. Lynn's heart raced as she spun around, but there was no one there. The hallway was empty. The figure in the window was gone, vanished without a trace. But the feeling of being watched lingered. Lynn's breath quickened as the temperature in the room seemed to drop, the air thick with an unnatural chill. Then, as if the hospital itself was holding its breath, Lynn heard it. A soft, low voice coming from somewhere in the room. It was Mr. Tan's voice, but it didn't sound like him. It was distorted, twisted with pain and desperation. "Help me, nurse. Please, help me." Lynn stumbled back, her head spinning. The voice seemed to come from every corner of the room. It surrounded her, pressing in on her. She reached for the door, but it wouldn't open. The handle was cold and unyielding. The walls seemed to close in around her, and she could feel her pulse pounding in her ears. She turned back toward the bed, and that's when she saw him, Mr. Tan, or at least something that resembled him. His face was twisted in agony, his eyes wide open, staring at her with an intensity that chilled her to the bone. He wasn't alive. He couldn't be. But then his lips moved. "I never left," he whispered, his voice hoarse, as if he were speaking from beyond the grave. Lynn screamed and finally forced the door open, rushing out into the hallway. The laughter from earlier echoed down the corridors, filling her ears. She ran through the hospital, her feet pounding against the cold, hard floors. She didn't stop until she reached the main entrance, but when she tried to leave, the door slammed shut in her face. The hospital had trapped her inside. Panicked, Lynn rushed to find another exit, but every door she tried led her to the same place. Room 5. Every hallway seemed to lead her back there. The door to room 5 was now wide open, and she could hear soft, raspy breathing coming from inside. But when she stepped in, the room was empty again. The bed was neat, the machine silent, but the air was thick, and the feeling of eyes watching her was overwhelming. The giggle returned, this time louder, echoing through the hallways. "You can't leave," the voice whispered. Lynn ran, but she knew deep down that she would never escape. Not from the hospital, not from the patients who had never left. She would be trapped here forever, just like them. As the night dragged on, she could hear them, the patients, all the ones who had vanished without a trace. Their whispers, their laughter, their cries for help. They were all around her, in every corner, in every shadow. And no matter how fast she ran, she couldn't escape the hospital that held them, held her, prisoner. The hospital was alive and it was hungry,